Radhe Radhe. Welcome to the beginning of another live sangha. May this be an offering to Sri Radha Krishna. And as we await our first guests to arrive, allow me to set the intention for this space as being an all-inclusive environment open to everyone regardless of how you're feeling, your belief system, how you identify, etc. May we come together as fellow spiritual seekers to uplift each other, relate in one another's experiences, and share positive sentiments. Welcome. Hello, Sky Guardian. Namaste. Hello, Mihai. And thank you for blessing us so early on with a heart me. Radhe Radhe. And hello, Alyssa. Hello, Gills. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm happy to be providing some soothing feelings your way. And hello, Kodar. I trust that you all are feeling as well as you can, regardless of whatever stuff is happening in your life at this time. Hello, Esther. And hello, Ro Marquez. And thank you, Mihai, for another pair of team bracelets. Radhe Radhe. Dazzy, you share that I am so validating. Well, I feel like all of us are just a little misunderstood, and in any way I can help increase feeling understood within my own self included, and everyone else, it's worth it. Thank you, Esther, for your rose. Jai Sita Ram. And Mihai, thank you for another cheer you up. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hello, Ri. Hello, Julia. I had a question of the day for you all on this Heart Chakra Wednesday. Today I'm curious. What have you learned from fear? We make fear out to be a bad guy. But we do learn from the experience. Like all emotions, they have something for us to understand. What does fear teach us? Or maybe you could break down one particular one in your life, or interpret it in any other way that an answer comes for you. Michelle, you share that fear has taught you everything. Touché, touché. Tazzy, you add that with fear comes regret sometimes. Yeah, definitely. And regret may allow us to reflect on better actions that we can make in the present. And Tazzy, you add that fear shows you what you hold dearest. That's very true. Sometimes we don't even realize what we hold close until we feel that fear of losing it. Share. You share. That fear keeps us safe, but also holds us back. Yeah. It's a kind of carefulness. Re-alien, you share that fear has taught you it emerges when something beautiful is on the other side of it. Ah, yeah. Yeah. It's like a little door, and if you just walk through it, what's awaiting by courage, bravery, or letting go, that can teach us something we didn't know even existed. Mills, you share that fear taught you that your fight or flight was in tune I like that. A kind of trusting of your experience. Zakadet, you share that we have to analyze our fear. That can be really helpful, to question why we are fearful. Happy to have you here, art lover. You are a beautiful thing. Esther, you share that fear has taught you to learn to be calm. Being calm definitely is a learning experience. I concur. Part of the peak existence, you ask, what would you tell Putin if you could talk to him? The great Canadian dish of Poutine, I would probably say thank you. Express my gratitude. Kotar, you share that you fear not being full and finishing the last slices. This continues in your trend of asking pizza-related questions, I see. You also asked, do I like pizza? Of course. Yes, pizza is very tasty. Alright. Sounds like we've learned a lot of lessons through fear, and so I'm very grateful for this exploration of it together. I will conclude with Tone Reds, who shared that fear and pain are masters. Indeed they are. Yeah. And Ari, you share that honestly fear taught me to stop worrying. And Liv, you share that fear taught you everything about love. Beautiful. And Z, you share that from fear, you realize what you love. How wonderful. Alright, I'm going to minimize the question of the day. I thank you again for this demonstration of how fear is not always our enemy. And I like that cue, that it's not bigger than me. Indeed. You are the container of all your emotions, and therefore they are within you and not without. And thank you, Bobby Sue, for your heart me team bracelet and cheer you up. Radhe Radhe. And thank you, Liv, for your rose. 8 of them in total, I see. Jai Sitaram. Part of existence, part of the peak of existence. You say, no, but really, what would you tell Putin or share with him, since he seems to be very scared of existence? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there someone named Putin here? I thought you meant the food. Let me scroll up. My apologies. I don't see a Putin. But in general, I would say to someone who is afraid of existence that you don't have to understand it all to be allowed to be here. You don't have to have control over everything to have control of your own happiness. And that's ultimately what we're all after. And thanks for asking, Dirty Hippie Gypsy Mom. I am doing well, thank you. Namaste. Oh, you meant Putin, not Poutine. Well, I think yes. what I said about not having to have control over everything, to still have control over our own happiness. And that's the important part. All right, I wanted to, before we open up to questions and answers, read from a short part of the spiritual teachings of Ramana Maharshi. Let me move over so it doesn't cut me off. This is a very direct book. It is a transcription of a conversation between Ramana Maharshi, a great Indian sage, and some questioners who gathered around him. Yesterday we began it and we discussed the following questions. Who am I? If I am none of these, then who am I? What is the nature of awareness? When will the realization of the self be gained? Will there not be the realization of the self even while the world is there, taken as real? Why? When will the world, which is the object seen, be removed? What is the nature of the mind? What is the path of inquiry for understanding the nature of the mind? And how will the mind become quiescent? What is the means for constantly holding on to the thought, who am I? And now the questioner asks another question. Are there no other means for making the mind quiescent? Other than self-inquiry, there are no adequate means. If, through other means, it is sought to control the mind will appear to be controlled, but will again go forth. Through the control of breath also, the mind will become quiescent, but it will only be quiescent only so long as the breath remains controlled, and when the breath resumes, the mind will also again start moving and will wander as impelled by residual impressions. The source is the same for both mind and breath. Thought, indeed, is the nature of the mind. The thought, I, is the first thought of the mind, and that is egoity. It is from that whence egoity originates that breath also originates. Therefore, when the mind becomes quiescent, the breath is controlled, and when the breath is controlled, the mind becomes quiescent. But in deep sleep, although the mind becomes quiescent, the breath does not stop. This is because of the will of God, so that the body may be preserved and other people may not be under the impression that it is dead. In the state of waking and in samadhi, when the mind becomes quiescent, the breath is controlled. Breath is the gross form of mind. And when the body dies, the mind takes the breath along with it. Therefore, the exercise of breath control, pranayama, is only an aid for rendering the mind quiescent. Mano nigraha. It will not destroy the mind. Mano nashaha. Like the practice of breath control, meditation on the forms of God, repetition of mantras, restriction on food, etc., are all but aids for rendering the mind quiescent. Through meditation on the forms of God and through repetition of mantras, the mind becomes one-pointed. The mind will always be wandering, just as when the chain is given to an elephant to hold in its trunk, it will go along grasping the chain and nothing else. So also when the mind is occupied with a name or form, it will grasp that alone. When the mind expands in the form of countless thoughts, each thought becomes weak. But as thoughts get resolved, the mind becomes one-pointed and strong. For such a mind, self-inquiry will become easy. Of all the restrictive rules, that relating to the taking of sattvic food in moderate quantities is best. These are foods that don't make the mind feel fatigued nor increase its activities, like most fruits, nuts, and vegetables, oils, and some milk products. By observing this rule, the sattvic quality of the mind in turn will also increase, and that will be helpful to self-inquiry. The questioner asks, the residual impressions, thoughts, of objects appear unending like the waves of an ocean. When will all of them be removed? As the meditation on the self rises higher and higher, the thoughts will get destroyed. Questioner asks, is it possible for the residual impressions of objects that come from the beginningless time, as it were, to be resolved, and for one to remain as the pure self? Without yielding to the doubt, is it possible or not, one should persistently hold on to the meditation on the self. Even if one be a great sinner, one should not worry and weep, "Oh, I am a sinner, how can I be saved?" One should completely renounce the thought, "I am a sinner," and concentrate keenly on meditation on the self. Then one would surely succeed. There are not two minds, one good and the other evil. The mind is only one. It is the residual impressions that are of two kinds, auspicious and inauspicious. When the mind is under the influence of auspicious impressions, it is called good, and when it is under the influence of inauspicious impressions, it is regarded as evil. The mind should not be allowed to wander toward worldly objects and what concerns other people. However bad other people may be, one should bear no hatred for them. Both desire and hatred should be eschewed. All that one gives to others, one gives to oneself. If this truth is understood, who will not give to others? When oneself arises, all arises. When oneself becomes quiescent, all becomes quiescent. To the extent we behave with humility, to that extent there will result good. If the mind is rendered quiescent, one may live anywhere. Alright, let us pause our reading of the spiritual teachings of Ramana Maharshi there, and let us continue at a later point in this live stream. This live stream may be slightly shorter than usual, given that I've agreed to hang out with my father after this, but I thank you all for listening to this short reading. We may open up to questions and answers. And thank you, Lex, for sending that heart me and tiny diny whilst I read. Yippee! And Sarah Cutie Pie, thank you for your rose. Radhe Radhe. And much love to you, Dean Dude. Thank you, Nunya, for your heart me. Hari Om Tat Sat. And John F., thank you for your rose. part of the peak existence, you are wondering, how can I change my perception and realize so that I can live a more moral life? I have found in my experience that morality, what we call as morality, is often just a consequence of being really present, without anywhere to be, without any kind of pride to change something that otherwise you would not have. For example, I'm always drawn to the story of a woman who drops her purse. Or an old lady who drops her purse and all of the belongings spill out onto the sidewalk. And person A walks past and does nothing. And person B walks past and they actually do something. So what was in the mind of person A and person B that compelled the first person to walk past and the second person to do something? And yes, how to get rid of the pride. We'll get to that following the story. Well, person A, they were thinking about how important it is that they go to work. Because if they don't go to work on time and they stop to help this lady, then they could lose their job. They're on thin ice. And if they lose their job, they lose their source of income. If they lose their source of income, then that makes their financial status unstable. And with an unstable financial status, how can they possibly be happy? But person B, they were also on their way to work. They were also on thin ice with their boss. They also know that if they could have stopped to help the old lady pick up the contents of her purse, then they may also lose their job. And if they lose their job, they also become financially unstable. The difference is, they know that their happiness is not defined by external situations. They are present whilst walking because their mind isn't dead set on their goal. Whatever happens, when they get to work, they will deal with it then. But in this moment, everything that the universe has put around us, that is for us to attend to. So, the moral action here is to help the old lady pick up her belongings. Not because of some moral philosophy, but simply by being present. Simply by having an awareness that they are in the service of this present moment, that any future time in which they may be a part of, they will be of service to that environment when it arises in their experience. Until then, do what you can with what you have from where you are. And thank you, Ragnhildur, for your rose that you sent a moment ago. Hariom Tat Sat. And thank you, Deb, for your rose and friendship necklace. Radhe Radhe. Thank you, Masa, for your quartet of roses. Jai Sita Ram and Mystic Spirit Eyes. Thank you for your hand hearts. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And thank you, Chloe, for your rose. King Kong Bing Bong, you ask, what's the difference between a yogi and a swami? Sounds like a good setup for a joke. But in the absence of one, I will tell you. A yogi is a practitioner of yoga. A swami is a particular kind of yogi who has become a sannyasi. It often comes with various vows, like the vow of brahmacharya, chastity, or ahimsa, non-violence, which carries over to their diet. A yogi is a little bit more experimental. They can be. A yogi does not necessarily have any vows. But a swami is like a monk. They have taken some monastic vows. But it's a good question. Julia, you had asked, Yam, what is it that I'm attached to if I get upset when I ask a small favor and someone doesn't do it? There isn't enough information. For many people, it could be the expectation that if you ask someone to do it, then they're expected to return. However, for more spiritually open-minded people, it could be even subtler than that. You could have an attachment, for example, to their own well-being, and you know that them doing this favor would benefit them because you're giving them the opportunity to do some service. And when we are engaged in service, we become a little less selfish. And when we see the potential in someone to be more selfless, we can even be attached to that potential in them. So without extra information, we cannot say for certain what it is you are attached to, but that would be my best guess, since I know that you are very spiritually open-minded, Tansuela. Sorry, Julia. And thank you, Mystic Spirit Dives, for your heart meet. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you for asking, Young Blood. My day has been well so far. I was programming today. Laura, you had asked, Yam, is being there for my grandma would help her illness even though she doesn't want help? I think I understand your question. It of course depends if you are her dependent. Sorry, she is your dependent. If it is your responsibility, then you still have a duty to take care of her. For example, with little children, even if they don't accept our help, it doesn't mean we stop giving them help because they are still dependent on our help. But if it's someone who's not dependent on you, then if they don't accept your help, then you can't force them to take it. Even though we know that it would benefit them, it can only benefit them if they accept it. And without the control for them to accept it or not, we have to concede. In such a scenario, that doesn't mean we no longer provide them with the opportunity for help. That can always be available for them if they choose to accept it. We just become patient until that time arises, if/when. And Laura, you ask, how would I help her see that it's not healthy? Perhaps there might be an insecurity in that she doesn't want to burden other people. She wants to be seen as independent. And if that's the case, then she might not recognize that it can be a blessing to allow people to help you. That you are actually helping them in return because you are providing them with the opportunity to be selfless. As in the case of grandparents and parents, when the role of dependency swaps, that can be a time to give back to someone who gave you so much, and that almost makes the cosmic transaction between souls in the balance again. If one is insecure that accepting help makes you a burden, it would be helpful to have them understand that you are not a burden. If people are directing energy towards you, that's their choice. And it makes them feel better, especially when you have given them so much energy. It's the least one could do to repay that. Radhe Radhe. And thank you, John F., for your flowers. Hari Om Tat Sat. And thank you, Storm, for your heart meet. Jai Sita Ram. Part of the peak of existence, you had asked, why do we want to be understood so badly? Like, at least I get pretty invested. That is a quality you inherit from your father, your spiritual father, the source of existence. The source of existence wants to be understood so bad. And we are all expressions of that source. And as a consequence of that, we get to learn about the source through everyone, including ourselves. Many qualities inherent in us are inherited from the divine. And those divine qualities are meant to be relished. And sharing those qualities does not make you selfish. For example, one divine quality that you have is love. And if you share that love with people, that doesn't make you selfish. Quite the contrary, actually. It makes you selfless. So I think in this way, we want to be understood because that capacity to be understood is a divine quality that we have inherited from the source. And through understanding each other, we can come to relish the divine. Thank you, Radiohead drums. Just the drums from Radiohead. For your 10 roses. Radhe Radhe. And Pantagor, thank you for your heart me. And 5 tiny tinies. Yippee! And thank you, Geese, for your finger heart. Jai Sita Ram. And thank you, Hannah, for your heart me too. Dirty hippie gypsy mom, you share that your 20-month-old just booped my nose. That's it. I have to boop you back now. Boop. And thank you, Aurora. Yes, I am feeling well though. Thank you. Jane, you share that caring for someone is something you struggle with too. Could I recommend a book or reading? A reading on learning to care for someone. Let's see, I have to go back into my childhood probably. How about The Giving Tree? That's a great book on giving. But in general, I have found that, at least for me, my method of learning is not in the words of others, which often makes me a poor source for books, if any of you want to read them. I'm probably not the person to ask. For me, our lives have so much information in them. We have this database of, data points and all of the experiences that we have gained in this life. Through processes like introspection, meditation, journaling, shadow work, therapy, or other forms of counseling, we can start churning that ocean of milk into yogurt, into butter, and then ghee, the miracle substance. We can start processing all those data points and come up with inductive reasoning in the direction of truth. When we cultivate the experiences that we have already experienced, you find a treasure trove within you, just waiting to be received. And thank you, Trainadora, for your heart me. And a tiny Diny. Yippee! Good night, Liv. And thank you, Bobby Sue, for your pair of cheer you ups. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Storm, for your cheer you up too. And Liv, thank you for your lock and key. Chloe, you share. Sometimes I wonder if I read too much and should focus more on experience. It is certainly an irreplaceable part of spiritual learning, that is the processing of our experience. We normally do it subconsciously, as in the case of sleeping. But if we can consciously add to that process, it can be a miraculous thing. Thank you, Edmo, for your heart meat and for your 4 roses. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Jane, for your heart meat and your quartet of team bracelets. Hari Om Tat Sat. I would recommend that simply, in addition to your reading, you take time to pause, to reflect. For example, if you just read a really good chapter and you're excited to get to the second chapter, just implement a short pause to reflect on what had happened during that chapter. Maybe if you're feeling extra studious, you could even write down some key points. You don't have to save the physical copy of what you've written down. It's just to help get out from the subconscious into the conscious some fact to process. And this applies to the digital age too. Watching a show, watching a YouTube video, watching a TikTok, or listening to a live stream. I would recommend even a 5-second pause, at the least. Ideally, maybe like 5 minutes, but that's a lot to expect in our age of technology. Hello, Dob Darker. Another heart coming your way. Thank you for your heart, me Dob. Radhe, Radhe. Saturnus, you share that worrying is like a rocking chair. Gives you something to do, but doesn't really get you anywhere. I like that. Thank you. Divinely Chosen, you share that also reading out loud helps. What a great idea. Yeah. Hello, Rachel. And thank you, Sindot, for your heart me. Radhe, Radhe. Thank you, Mercury, for your trio of roses. And Marifer. Thank you for your rose. Jai Sita Ram. And part of the peak of existence, you add, it gets you nowhere, but there is nowhere you have to be. You all are so wise. I'm very honored to be here. Madam Nugget, you are asking, what kind of soup do you like? Well, primordial soup captures my attention. The soup of life. Thank you, Clink. Happy to have you here. And Stephanie, you ask, be honest, are you ever anxious, mad, or angry? Of course. And if I was anxious, mad, or angry, I probably wouldn't go on live. So you get the best version of me while live streaming. However, outside of my live streams, I have learned so much from my anxiety and my anger that I'm very blessed to have a lot of tools at my disposal to help me process those feelings when they do arrive. For example, I have learned that when you start to feel anxiety arising, without judging it, it turns into a kind of excitement. There is an alchemy of our emotions. Like how alchemists, they noted that the density of lead is very similar to the density of gold. And there are some compounds containing lead that look a little like gold. So they wondered if there was a way to alchemize lead into gold. Lead is poisonous to the body, but gold is a treasure. Wouldn't that be great to turn a poison into a treasure? Well, you can consider anxiety to be like a poison, and excitement to be like your treasure. The reaction here that alchemizes anxiety into excitement is none other than acceptance, patience, non-judgmental awareness. You can try it for yourself, that when anxiety arises, before labeling it as such, maybe that's just a precursor to a kind of excitement. And if you wait for it to turn into that, you are a true emotional alchemist. I love that word you chose, Allison. a pre-emotion. Very nice. And thank you, Storm, for your 5 cheer you ups. Almost said team bracelets. Thank you, Storm. Radhe, Radhe. Mr. Astrolabe, you share that you like what the Stoics thought, that virtue is the key to happiness. There is something about living in each moment to bring out the infinite instead of being limited by our finitude, that allows us to be purposeful, engaged in meaning, without disregard for our potential. Nambital, you ask, what about sadness or anger? They can transform into beautiful things too. Anger can transform into passion, and sadness can transform into a kind of stillness. Haven't you ever noticed after a good cry, there's a stillness in the air? When you've let your last tear drop and you take that breath afterwards, what made you sad might not have changed. What has changed is how you feel about it. They talk about the calmness before the storm. Well, there's also a peace after the storm too. Lily, you share the stillness after a good cry feels great. I'm happy you related to that. And thank you, Vanessa, for your hand hearts. Radhe, Radhe. Part of the peak existence, you ask, where could I study nothing, since you are so good at nothing? Here, I'll give you a practical insight into the nature of nothing. If you want to discover some of the qualities of nothing, ask yourself, what qualities does everything have? Therefore, the negation of that quality must apply to nothing. Why is this important? Rather than just a philosophical musing, well, that very nothingness is not different from the source of existence. Some call that God. So if you want to know more about God, consider some aspect of this world. Negate it. Now you know something of your original nature. Consider, for example, that everything in this world seems to be filled with both good and bad. Goodness and badness. Alright then. So nothingness, that source, must be beyond both good and bad. Neti neti is the Sanskrit term. Not this, not that. Consider, for example, that everything has a beginning and an end. It is temporary. Therefore, nothing is permanent. Therefore, the source is eternal. We'll do one more. It seems like nothing in this world gives you happiness. Or rather, everything is unfulfilling. Therefore, the source must be the place of happiness, must be that which is fulfilling. Thank you, Sarah Lynn, for your pair of tiny tinies. Yippee! And thank you, Lily, for your hat and mustache. Radhe, Radhe. Nanobite, you share that you've had a very stressful week. That's quite alright. Stressful week means full of challenges. And the fact that you are still here means that the challenges didn't beat you. You are certainly wiser, albeit exhausted. Hello, Loz. And that's a great one, Arlen. Everything is coming from and going to nothing. Ambidol, you ask, how can despair turn to hope or darkness to light? Sometimes despair is a catalyst for letting go. In despair, we are taken away from something which we are attached to. And when we realize that we are still whole, even in absence of that thing we are attached to, then that despair can serve as a very grounding reminder that what you are is not dependent on anything external to yourself. This kind of remembering brings hope in the form of possibility and potential with this newfound realization. Who you are cannot be taken away from what you are, and with that, so much is possible. And well said, divinely chosen, gives you a reason to go on. Thank you, John F., for your pair of cakes. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Lily, for another hand hearts. Hari Om Tat Sat. And Ron, thank you for your heart meet and 11 finger hearts. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And thank you, Lori, for another tiny. Yum, 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 yum. Rachel, you ask, how do you deal with someone taking anger out on you when it has nothing to do with you? That very fact that you have added actually is the key to the problem itself. Because it's when we feel like this anger is personal, that's when we might react out of self-defense. If we understand that the cause of their anger is not in you, then we don't have to be frightened by it. When we know the cause, or at the very least, seek to understand the cause, then we can direct them. We can say, you do have the right to be angry, and I want you to use that passion to resolve what's hurting you. And I want you to know that what's hurting you is not within me. And if we can, with that infinite patience, direct them to the cause of pain within themselves, give them the tools for their own patience and commitment to understanding, then, like Avatar, the last airbender, we can redirect the energy without receiving it on our end. But the key is indeed in the fact that that anger is not supposed to be directed to you. So you need not take it personally. And thank you, Night Witch Tarot, for your rose. Radhe Radhe. And LG Rajinder, thank you for your 9 roses. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hello, Amanda. And thank you, Tinda, for your rose too. And thank you, G, for your rose. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Crouton, you ask, how do I stop procrastinating? I need to get work done. Oftentimes, we value short-term gratification over long-term satisfaction. What you should come to understand is that feeling satisfied in the long term is much more rewarding than gratified in the short term. We might be ignoring some responsibility because it feels so much better to just scroll on this app for a little bit. And it's true. It genuinely does feel good, if not better, in the present moment to get that dopamine rush. But the serotonin that is released once you have that sense of accomplishment, now that is something that you'd never trade for. With this in mind, choose the long-term satisfaction. If in the moment it is difficult, then break down what you have to do into bite-sized pieces. Just like the story of the clockmaker and the clock. After putting the last gear into the mechanism, the clock let out a big sigh. The clockmaker was taken aback and asked, "Mr. Clock, why did you just sigh?" The clockmaker said, the clock said to the clockmaker, I was just thinking about all the tick-tocks I have to do. The clockmaker understood and said, "My dear clock, all you have to do is one tick-tock at a time. Don't worry about what you have to do in the future. That always seems much bigger in proportion to what you have to do right now. And ultimately, what you have to do right now is so much simpler and much easier to attend to. So do that." And thank you, Hari, for your ice cream cone. Hari Om Tat Sat. Miso, you ask, am I part of the Hare Krishnas? I have much respect for the Hare Krishnas, and I do look up to Krishna and his divine counterpart, Radha. However, I'm not affiliated with the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, nor any organization. Zaldris, you asked, do you think we will ever develop faster than light travel and meet other life forms? Ultimately, the being that awaits us is not out there in uncharted space, but inside our inner cosmology. There are parts of ourselves that are almost alien to our present way of thinking, that we have to interact with, understand, meet again. And even beyond that, there is a super intelligent being that exists even deeper within ourselves, called as the higher self. If we can interact with that, come to know that being, then there is no need to travel amongst the stars when you have found the greatest source of light within. Hello, Dansuela. And thank you, G, for your pair of roses. Radhe, Radhe. Part of the peak existence, you ask, how would we choose good over bad if we don't experience them anymore? How do we choose good over bad? It's really a question of choosing selflessness over selfishness. What we consider as bad usually is just the result of someone with only themselves in mind. And what we consider as good is often the result of someone who keeps others in mind. We are independent in our free will, but not in our happiness. To truly become happy, we must live a purposeful life. That purpose only comes from providing service to others selflessly and honoring others as just as valid of a divine expression as yourself. When this happens, selflessness is only natural as a consequence of understanding. So we should come to understand that this consciousness that we have been blessed as is not something separate from any other living being. So attending to others can be the greatest gift you give yourself. Good actions flow freely from someone with this knowledge. And part of the peak of existence, you ask, or add to your question. You meant if you experience salvation or heaven. Even the highest heaven is not going to satisfy our soul's desire. Consider, for example, when we have the most delicious cake in the world. It's rich and moist. Every bite you take just quenches some desire for happiness. But once you get to your 30th bite, 50th, the cake is almost all gone. My goodness, you eat one more bite, you're going to explode. Suddenly, you want to throw up. How is this? That what was before a source of pleasure suddenly became a source of misery. Also consider, let's say you have a friend who is a poet, and they love sharing their poetry. So they ask you, can I share you this recent poem that I made? If, for example, we reply, yes, I love your poems, they always give me joy. They would be elated and they'd read the poem. We'd say, thank you, that was lovely. And if we asked them again, if they asked you again, can I read this poem again to you? You might say, okay, sure, yeah. If you liked it so much. All right. So, they read the poem to you again. All right, very nice, thank you. Can I read to you a third time? Fourth time? Fifth time? By the 10th time, you'd say, my God, can you stop reading this poem to me? What we consider as sources of joy eventually become sources of pain if we continue to try to quench our thirst by them. And TikTok is assuming that I am not real, so I have to do a puzzle. All right, I verified. Likewise, there is no pleasure that can be infinitely fulfilling. And this includes the prospect of the highest heaven you can dream of. That is why even someone immersed in temporary bliss may not actually be truly happy. There is still a purposefulness that they are lacking. And so this earthly plane is actually the best place to find true fulfillment. This fulfillment comes from the service we do to others. So it's not that you reach enlightenment and everything is good, bad actions, right actions, doesn't matter. No. We're seeing these things as two separate when they're actually one. It is right action which is the true salvation. If we are constantly engaged in selfless service, that is true enlightenment. I hope that answered your question. And thank you, Blixie, for your tiny. Nippy! And Giuliano, thank you for your TikTok, for your rose, your ice cream cone and cloud bread. As always, my friend, Radhe. And Maria, thank you for your rose. Hari Om Tat Sat. And Night Witch Tarot, thank you for your rose. Jai Sita Ram. And Mundane Human Things, thank you for your hat and mustache. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And thank you, Sarah Lynn, for your pair of tiny dinies. Nippy! And 11 roses, plus another 1. And 1, 2, 3, 4 TikToks. Radhe. I'm glad that you enjoy the stickers, Amanda. And thank you, Maria, for another rose from you too, dear. And thank you, Linda, for your half dozen roses. MB Doll, you share that enlightenment or heaven is supposed to be perfect. Yes. And we use these words in a few different ways. What the common person considers enlightenment or heaven is to be free of suffering. That is what it means. But the wise know that true enlightenment is not beyond suffering, nor is true kind of heaven. Suffering might seem in the short term like a negative thing, but it is through such challenges that we grow, that we learn, that we become wiser, and the infinite growth of the soul. This is our eternal journey. Thank you, Sarah Lynn, for another heart me. Radhe Radhe. And Night Witch Tarot, thank you for your rose too. Hariom Tat Sat. Welcome back for reality, or to reality, sorry. You ask, is Radhe a prayer / thankness for something? I like that word, a thankness. Radhe means, oh Radha. Who is Radha? She is the divine feminine, symbolized here to the right of Krishna. So it's a salutations to her within everything. And thank you, Sarah Lynn, for another tiny. Yippee! And Night Witch Tarot, thank you for another rose too. And thank you, Kami, for your heart me. Hariom Tat Sat. And Lily, thank you for your quintet of tinies. Yahoo! Marianne, you ask, so I'm gonna be in pain for the rest of my life and call it a blessing? It sounds scary when you put it like that, but remember, just like the clock, only one tick-tock at a time. All you have to get through is this moment. If we think about all the challenges we have to go through in the future, then it seems overwhelming. But your existence takes place only now. And this moment isn't so bad. Yes, there may be things a part of it which challenge us, but that challenge is not meant to restrict us, but provide us with an opportunity for expression. Consider, for example, an artist given no limitations. We give them a full warehouse of every kind of easel, canvas size. We give them every kind of paintbrush, every pigment of paint that's ever been existing. We give them acrylic, oil. We give them charcoal. We give them, there are no limitations to what this artist could make. Sounds like a dream, but actually it'd be quite sad, because an artist lives off of thinking outside the box by taking some limitation, that is what they have, and then using that to make something beautiful of it. Otherwise, with all these resources, we then feel like we have to make use of them all, and that's simply not possible. What is possible, however, is to restrict our scope to this moment. In this moment, we have various limitations. These limitations are for us to be creative with and use them for a kind of self-expression that is possible. If you give an artist 3 words maybe moon, ocean, and light. And you give them a restricted color palette and one canvas and 2 kinds of paintbrushes. Now that you've limited what can be made, now the mind really starts thinking about what's possible. And with that, the artist will go to work. And thank you, Sarah Lynn, for another fire and 14 roses. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Nene, for your heart me. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hello, Adri D. And thank you, G, for another trinity of roses. Jai Sita Ram. Thank you, Violet Eyes, for your heart me. And Night Witch Tarot, thank you for another rose. Hari Om Tat Sat. And Audrey D, thank you for your quintet of roses and a heart me. Jai Sita Ram. Good morning, Steve. The only S you share that you have been trying to fast, and it looks like I moved back more than I moved forward. What to do? Fasting is indeed a very difficult thing. Any kind of austerity in which we deny the mind, if we bite off more than we can chew, sometimes a relapse is possible. That is why it's imperative that in our austerities we be practical with our goals. Some people, they thrive off of doing larger challenges at first. They find it hard to stick to small ones. Other people are just the reverse, and they prefer to build up their tolerance of mental denial by starting with small challenges. So I would recommend getting in touch with yourself and look back in your history. See what mode of challenging yourself is most fruitful. How are you most successful? And to add to that, in ways that you aren't successful, forgive yourself. What makes someone consistent is not their ability to punish themselves, but to forgive themselves. Consider, for example, someone who vows to go to the gym every day. Now, they may mess up one of those days, and suddenly they are in anguish. Pardon me. And they spend so much energy punishing themselves mentally that by the time the next day arrives, they don't bother for the second time. And then they feel even more guilty. And so by the third day, they've given up. However, if you are quick to forgive yourself, you are just as quick to get back to the discipline the next day. With this in mind, don't feel like it's your duty to punish yourself for making mistakes, because it's your duty to forgive yourself so that you allow room for mistakes without them taking away from your greater consistency. Thank you, Audrey, for your pair of roses. And thank you, Jason, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. Jonathan, you ask, what happened for you to delve into the spiritual realm? Or were you born with profound insight? I'm not so certain that anyone is born with profound insight. If you find someone who has lots and lots of muscles, You know they had to go through so much pain in order to get that much gain. Likewise, when we see someone with wisdom, I'm not saying this is me. I'm just talking about people with wisdom in general. It means that they must have gone through a lot of problem solving, which implies a lot of problems. Instead of feeling like, big philosophical questions, it's not for me to think about. Do your best. Why not try to think about it? Even if you don't get anywhere, even if you don't get a Nobel Prize, you might as well try your best thinking about the difficult things. So, allow yourself to be challenged, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. And the more challenges you go through, stronger, the wiser, the more developed you are. Alienated, you share that life's tough tonight, and that's okay. Sometimes we come into the habit of overgeneralizing, that if I feel like this now, that means I'll feel like this forever. The good news and the bad news is that no feeling is permanent. This means that when you're sad, there will eventually be a subsiding of that sadness. When there is pleasure, there will also be a subsiding of that pleasure. So how do we find our center in the changing mind? Shift your perspective from the thinker to the witness of the thought. This can help externalize the feeling so that we can realize our true nature as separate from the changing world, from the changing mind. There's a story of a disciple of this guru, and he came to this guru and said, "Oh master, I'm so sad." Whack! Upon hearing that, the guru hit him over the head with a stick. He said, "Ow, what was that for?" He said, "Haven't you been listening to our teachings? You are not sad. Sadness is occurring to you. Get that? Okay, I'll think about it, master." And he went off, meditating on this idea. I am not sad. Sadness is occurring to me. Suddenly, it made sense. And so, being elated, he ran all the way to his guru's hermitage, and he said, "Oh Guru Dev, what you said really stuck with me. I understand that sadness is occurring to me. You know, I am so happy." Whack! What was that for, Guru Dev? Did you catch what you said? Yes, I said, I am so happy. Oh, happiness is also occurring to me. We identify so much with our feelings. We feel like we are the ones responsible for them. But they are merely a passing experience which comes and goes without our control. Knowing this to be such, you are the effervescent stillness behind all thoughts. And thank you, Storm, for your quintet of cheer you ups you sent a minute ago. Radhe Radhe. And thank you, Lily, for your quintet of rosas. Hari Om Tat Sat. Gregor, you share that emotions and thoughts flow through us as if we are the riverbank. Beautifully put. And thank you, Jared, for your additional heart me team bracelet and cheer you up. Always happy to have you here. And thank you, Night Witch Tarot, for your rose too. Radhe Radhe. Hello, Gigi. You ask if I have any book that I could recommend for you to have at least a wisdom to explore. Just one wisdom. Where is my... Oh, here it is. Alright, since you ask so nicely, I would recommend the Bhagavad Gita. This means Bhagavad, divine, Gita, song. It's a divine song. And it was sung more than 5,000 years ago. And yet it's still practical today. I'm actually reading it ASMR style. That is, by whispering with some layered rain sounds in the background on my ASMR channel, in case you wanted to listen to a read-through of this copy in particular. But there's many versions of it. I happen to have a couple. And I would encourage experimenting with different versions. But don't worry so much about which version. And thank you, mundane human things, for your donut, 6 ice cream cones, a ginger man, 2 popcorns, a bubble tea, a pumpkin spice latte, a whipped coffee, and a cloud bread. Making me hungry. Radhe Radhe. And Lily, thank you for your hanging lights. Jai Sita Ram. Gregor, you clarify. So if you are just talking about music, in Sanskrit, could you just say Gita? That's right. Gita means song. There are many different famous Gitas. Bhagavad just happens to be the most famous Gita. There's also the Uddhav Gita and Ashtavakra Gita and many more that I am unlearned of. And thank you, Lily. Did I thank you for these hanging lights? I thank you again anyway. Hari Om Tat Sat. And thank you, Jarrett, for an enchanted guitar. That's very interesting. I had no idea that gift even existed. It's very lovely. Radhe, Radhe. Ayan, you ask, do I know Sai Baba? I think I have heard of Sai Baba, but I forget exactly who he is. Yeah, I do remember this was a very famous saint in India who was recognized as God realized from his followers, and there are many videos of him preaching on YouTube, for example. Yeah, I did learn some things from him, but it's been a while, so forgive me if I can't recollect exactly. And yes, it shall bring enchanted music, you hope, says Jarrett. Music, perhaps not of the ears, but of the soul. Sky Guardian, you say, no, that's the other Sai Baba. I can't tell if you're joking. Is there different Sai Babas? Actually, if I am thinking of the same one, then there was the idea that he was the reincarnation of a different Sai Baba. Confusing. Thank you, Lily, for your sushi. Correct? Interesting. Yes, thank you, Lily. Radhe, Radhe. Sai Baba equals Sai Baba reincarnated. Yeah. Alright, you had asked, Ragnhildar, any recommendations on how to start learning Sanskrit? I've had a couple different attempts through various YouTube channels and websites. For me personally, the fastest improvement I've had has come through the textbook that I bought recently. That is An Introduction to Sanskrit by Cambridge University. I think it's called The Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit. With that, my understanding has accelerated very rapidly, and I'm very grateful for this book. I was a little cautious of books that were, written for a Western audience by Westerners, such as Cambridge University, because oftentimes Indologists are more interested in the language itself rather than what you can do with it, such as study these ancient spiritual scriptures. But it seems like the authors also had a reverence for this import of it, and so we are taught directly from ancient spiritual scriptures as you go through the textbook, so I'd highly recommend it. And thank you, Ava, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. But first and foremost, you're going to want to get familiar with it's not an alphabet, I was going to say, but the Abugida, which is the set of sounds that are included in the Sanskrit language. And even that is beautiful, since it's arranged with such a structure. It's actually very easy to memorize, probably even easier than English, even though it has many, many more times sounds than English does. But that's because the sounds are arranged in a perfect grid, from the guttural sounds, palatal, retroflex, dental, and labial. And each of those places of articulation have the same number of modifications to the air tract. Voiced, unvoiced, aspirated, unaspirated, nasalized, approximants, and fricatives. You just pair one modification with one articulation and you get a Sanskrit sound. So it forms a two-dimensional plane. If you can learn the Sanskrit sounds, then you're well on your way to understanding Sanskrit. Amanda, you share that you're jealous of my eyebrows. Well, my mother got them done for me the other day. She had offered, there's this Indian booth in the mall that does the threading, and I had never experienced it before. And she said, that it's actually a really relaxing experience. Even though, getting your eyebrows pulled out of your head, a little painful. I said, stop right there. I enjoy pain. Sign me up. And so it was actually very relaxing. And thank you, Storm, for your quartet of tiny tinies. Yippee! And well said, Don Suela. As long as you have your own eyebrows, you no longer need to be jealous. Sky Guardian, you share that. By the way, read the Vacha Murut section in advance. Some sections not always suited for the sangha. Alright, thank you for this disclaimer. Speaking of you, Sky Guardian, I was thinking about you today whilst I watched your Guru Dev's video on eating meat from Swami Tadatmananda Ji on the Arsha Bodha Center. I was thinking of this while part of the Peak of Existence asked the question, is it wrong to eat meat since it's not selfless? Well, I can direct you to that YouTube video that I watched this morning because it's very detailed on all the different nuances of diets whilst being a spiritual practitioner. Ultimately, it is rooted in the word ahimsa. Himsa means injury, but that prefix a doesn't necessarily mean no injury, because we have to have some consuming of life forms in order to keep this body alive. Because there is that argument, if everything has consciousness, then why do we draw the line at animals and still consume other plants? Well, it's because we have to draw the line somewhere, because there is no alternative besides starving yourself to death. The key point here is that ahimsa also includes to your body least injury, is what it is best translated to. Least injury means that we can do our best to minimize injury, do our best to eat from companies that don't cause harm to their workers or the animals that they raise. We do our best to minimize the injury that happens to the conscious beings that are a part of the process. However, from a spiritual perspective, it's more than just a moral argument. It's not that we should refrain from eating meat because you should not. This is different than some religious vow that you take in Judaism or Islam, where you vow not to eat pork. Spiritually, it's something you choose voluntarily, and it's done to accelerate your spiritual practice, because as we eat various life forms, we accumulate their karma too. And so it's best to eat life forms that are very simple in nature, so that a minimal karmic transaction takes place. Additionally, very simple foods don't take a lot of energy to digest, so that energy in return can be directed towards our spiritual practice. Additionally, another point I'd like to add before we move on is it's part of discipline as well. Of course, naturally the body craves these very gratifying tamasic foods. However, once you engage in discipline in one area of life, it starts to become a bit of an adventure in all other areas of life. What can I do to be disciplined in my diet? in my routine, in my regiment, in all various facets of my life. And so it can be a good challenge to try to eat more vegetables. Sky Guardian, you share that you've been getting heat in the comment section of that video because you are being dogmatic. Well, you don't have to defend your guru. There is a story of Ram Das's guru, and a different devotee than Ram Das is at the forefront of this story. And the devotee asked Neem Karoli Baba, "What is the difference between you and I?" Now, Neem Karoli Baba had a very extravagant way of explaining the answer to his question. Instead of just responding, what he did is took him with him to a politician's house. And in the politician's house, Neem Karoli Baba was not behaving properly. He had his dirty feet up on the table, wasn't dressed in formal attire. And so when the politician came, he started reprimanding Neem Karoli Baba. "What are you doing in my house like this?" And so the devotee started defending his guru. Said, "How dare you make a mockery of this spiritual saint? Don't you have any idea who he is? Blah, 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 blah." And that's when Neem Karoli Baba turned to his devotee and said, "This is the difference between you and I. You get upset for someone who is not being made upset. What this means is that he was trying to defend his guru, even though his guru was not bothered by what he was being defended of. So he was only increasing his own suffering by taking offense to something that wasn't directed towards him. Thank you, couple of nomads, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Jarrett, for your flowers. Jai Sita Rama. And thank you, Babi Su, for your applause. Hari Om Tat Sat. That's quite alright, Mermander. Thanks for popping by. Best wishes back to you. And Dominica, you share that you were slicing your eggplant whilst listening. That's good timing and delicious. Aubergine, as they say in other places. And Amanda, you shared a few minutes ago that you forgot to eat today and just ate some pizza way too fast, and now your tummy hurts. Ah, tummy aches. Aren't they the worst? A good reminder to pace ourselves, both in our fasting and in our eating. Now, XP, you ask, do you have a favorite word in the Spanish language? Well, perhaps I could give you a good answer if I knew more Spanish words. Oftentimes I find myself saying, "Arriba, arriba," because I find it very satisfying to pronounce. Nyeti, you ask, do I think Neem Karoli reincarnated? I am sure that in his divine Leela, he is somewhere in the universe. They say that Neem Karoli Baba is an incarnation of Hanumanji, and Hanuman is one of the immortals, meaning they never die. And good night, part of the peak of existence. Happy to have you here. Why don't we crack open a short verse from the Pocket Pema Chodron. Here she is as a lovely Buddhist nun, and many of her wise words are quoted in this book. Alright, why don't we read number 103. Keep standing up. I remember my first interview with my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, very well, because I was hesitant to talk to him about what was really the problem in my life. Instead, I wasted the whole interview chattering. Every once in a while, he said, "How's your meditation?" And I said, "Oh, fine," and then just chattered on. When it was almost over, I blurted out, in the last half second, "I'm having this terrible time and I'm full of anger." Rinpoche walked me toward the door and said, "Well, what that feels like is a big wave that comes along and knocks you down. You find yourself lying on the bottom of the ocean with your face in the sand. And even though all the sand is going up your nose and into your mouth and your eyes and ears, you stand up and you begin walking again. Then the next wave comes and knocks you down. The waves just keep coming. But each time you get knocked down, you stand up and keep walking. After a while, you'll find that the waves appear to be getting smaller. That's how karma works. If you keep lying there, you'll drown. But you don't even have the privilege of dying. You just live with the sense of drowning all the time. So don't get discouraged and think, well, I was feeling depressed and I was hiding under the covers, but then I got out of bed, I took a shower. How come I'm not living in a Walt Disney movie now? I thought I was going to turn into Snow White. How come I'm not living happily ever after? The waves just keep coming and knocking you down, but you stand up again with some sense of rousing yourself. As Rinpoche said, after a while, you find that the waves seem to be getting smaller. That's really what happens. Keep standing up. Number 103. Thank you, Ragnhildur, for your trio of roses. And thank you, BW, for your 3 roses too. Radhe, Radhe. Lily, you shared that you love the shirt I'm wearing. At least what you can see of it. I'm actually wearing a shirt of the Buddha. There, you can see his forehead. It says beneath him, he's meditating. Let that shit go. My mother got it for me. Thank you, Liam, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. And Audrey D, thank you for your 20 roses. Hari Om Tat Sat. I'm happy you enjoyed the reading, Dansuela. Cooper, you were wondering if I know of Mevlana and the Knowledge Book. I don't, but those sound like wonderful sources of wisdom. Real, you share that it's hard to keep redoing days, as weird as it sounds. We all need something to move towards, so that instead of circling, we are spiraling upwards and outwards. Indeed, in the short term, it may seem like we are stuck in patterns, routines. By the law of incremental growth, if we can consciously engage ourselves in the betterment of one thing each day, then, in the long run, we can grow. Hello, premonitions. Thank you for your best wishes. Chloe, you share that you had a shirt with the same words, but a different Buddha. Well, a different image. It seems to hit harder with the Buddha saying it. I am sure that if the Buddha returned today and simply put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Let that shit go," my goodness, I would feel as though all my karma had been dissolved. Thank you, Ragnhildar, for another rosa. Jai Sitaram. I'm happy that you enjoyed the reading as well. Palya. Thank you, Bobby Sue, for your pair of fires. Hariom Tat Sat. Lily, you share that you had a tank top with the Buddha on it. It has a really significant meaning because of your mom. No, that's love you. Did I say that right? I meant to say that's lovely, but I accidentally said love you. I was going to say, did you know that one of the vows that a Buddha takes is to view everything as their mother? In reincarnation, given infinite lives, everyone has been your mother at least once, including the ants walking by you on the road, including the worms in your yard, including your pet dog, pet cat, including your father even. In fact, I'm sure it's not even the first time that your mother has been your mother. Knowing this to be such, how could we cause harm to anyone, given that everyone is our mother? And thank you, Dagger, for your rose. Radhe Radhe. And Night Witch Tarot, thank you for your rose. Hariom Tat Sat. Donsuela, you share, "Aw, I think my dog was a lovely mother to me at one time." I'm sure they had to be, in order to give you the opportunity to love them like a mother in return. Sky Guardian, you are wondering how many pages left on the Ramana Maharshi book. Well, we are 8 pages in. There are about 100 pages left. Sigh. I'd be happy to pause our reading of this book when your book arrives. Don't worry. This is one of those books that you can open wherever, given that the questions and answers weren't just from one session, but many different sessions. And thank you, Usha, for your little crown and 3 roses. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, Night Witch Tarot, for another rose. I am curious what the runes in your name mean. Yeti, you ask, have you achieved samadhi? If samadhi means the union of the subject and the object, then we are always in samadhi with at least one thing. Consider, for example, you're playing Skyrim. You're grinding away at your levels to get a certain number of experience points to purchase a new ability in your skill tree. During that grinding session, where you keep working away at your experience, you could lose track of time. You could even momentarily forget that you exist outside of the game. Skyrim Samadhi. Some drivers, once they get to their destination, they realize that they had been driving. Where was I? I was so absorbed in the act of driving that I forgot that I was not the car. I became it, entered that flow state. Suddenly I had arrived. Thank goodness, in one piece. That's sedan samadhi. Whenever you are fully immersed in what you are doing, know that to be samadhi. Diana, you ask, have you ever listened to Desert Dwellers? Meditative sound with Sanskrit words. I think you'd like them. No, I have not, but from what you have described, I'm sure I would as well. And thank you for your recommendation. Night Witch Tarot, you share that your runes say Lena. Your name is Lena Marie. Well, thank you for sharing, Lena Marie. And thank you, Sarah Lynn, for your pair of roses. Radhe, Radhe. So Yeti, you ask, how do we stay there? That's the funny thing. The moment we try to be conscious of it, we get taken out of the flow state. Just like lucid dreaming. Haven't you ever noticed? If you've ever really been interested in lucid dreaming, you might start trying all these different techniques. Count your fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, not dreaming. Read something twice. The gym. Okay, good. It hasn't changed. Look at the time. 4:46. 4:46. Okay, I'm not dreaming. And then you finally get to a dream where you reality check. Count how many fingers you have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6! I'm dreaming! I can do anything! Suddenly you're awake. You became so lucid that you woke up from the dream. Likewise, whenever you're in a state of consciousness that has that flow to it, when you try to stay into it, that's one of the things that pulls you out from it. So, a very counterintuitive answer to the question of staying inside this flow state is to forgive yourself for not being in that state. Don't consider any alternative to be less than. Otherwise, there's all this pressure, and that pressure pops your bubble. So consider this moment, whether you're in that state or not, to be enough. And that ironic acceptance may help yourself enter that flow state. And thank you, Sarah Lynn, for another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus another 18. What is that? 23. And another 2 roses. Radhe, Radhe. Chloe, you ask, are we bound to work through our karma no matter what? Or do we have to do it mindfully? I like that alternative. I wasn't expecting the question to turn that way. We have karma not just from this lifetime. Some of the things that we deal with in this moment are from parts of our childhood. For example, psychologists today recognize that so much of our fears, insecurities in this moment come from something that happened to us as children. And so a real big part of healing is looking back on your childhood with a more mature lens that you can analyze, forgive, accept, etc. In this way, we dissolve the karma of our childhood. Interestingly, however, many people have found that that's not enough. There are some things in this life that can't be explained by one life alone. So people turn to past life regressors who are able to direct you through hypnosis and other means to traumas that you might have experienced in another lifetime. And once you do that, the whole therapeutic process starts again. And then you can go 2 lifetimes back, 3 lifetimes, 4 lifetimes back. But how far does it go? Where does our karma begin? Now that is one of the unanswerable questions. Literally, the Buddha called it one of the imponderables. The reason this is such is because there is no start to our karma. There is no first lifetime. Just as you can count forwards forever, you can also count backwards forever. -1, -2, -3, -5. Did I skip -4? Overrated negative number anyway. So, that means we don't just have such and such karma to work through. We have infinite karma to work through. So the question is, how do we get through all infinite karma? And it's a trick question, actually. We don't. See, the goal isn't to be free from all karma. The goal is to be free in a different kind of sense. Materially, this universe works from the basis of karma. Everything is karma, materially. As long as we are identified with the world, then it is karma that dictates our happiness. If you have good karma, then you are happy. If you have bad karma, then you are unhappy. Spiritually, however, in the spiritual world, a different law takes place. This law, known as Sharanagati, transcends the law of karma once you become spiritual. Sharanagati refers to surrender. That is why, for a spiritual person, they could have all the good karma in the world, but still be unhappy. Like Prince Siddhartha, also known as the Buddha. He was born as a prince in a lavish kingdom. He got everything he wanted, and yet he was unhappy. He left that world in search of true happiness. Similarly, someone could have all the worst karma in the world, but still be happy due to their Sharanagati. For example, consider the story of the Christ, who was literally crucified, and yet, whilst being crucified, he was spouting out how even these people who are crucifying me should be forgiven. Oh Lord, they do not know what they are doing. Forgive them. He wasn't unhappy. If he was unhappy, he'd start yelling at them. Why have you done this? You should not have. He never used a swear word back at them. It is possible to be in adverse situations and yet inwardly be free. So it's not that we have to work on our karma and then when it's done with, we'll be happy. We can be happy even while surrounded by negative karma, let alone positive. Thank you, Gravity Bends. Yes, it does. For your hand hearts. Radhe Radhe. And thank you, the Happy Stippy, for your octet of roses. Jai Sita Rama. Thank you, Kevin, for your heart meat. And Tan Hao Yu, thank you for your heart meat. Hari Om Tat Sat. And thank you, This Is My Show, for the sweet memories you sent a few minutes ago. Radhe Radhe. And Lily, thank you for your heart meat, your finger heart, your quartet of roses, and a tiny yippee. Thank you, Night Witch Tarot, for another rose too. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And Ragnhildur, thank you for your swan. A Hansa. The beautiful metaphor of the swan is that its feathers are hydrophobic. Yet, it lives on the water. It is literally surrounded by it. But if you take a drop of water and put it on a swan feather, it'll roll off like a bead. Sometimes you may call a spiritual master a swan, a hansa, because they may be surrounded by Maya, and yet they are hydrophobic. They are Maya-phobic. And all of that ignorance just rolls off them like beads. And thank you, the happy Stippy, for your heart, me too. And yeah, to answer your question, Kevin, when negativity is directed towards me, they're allowed to be here. But if that negativity is directed towards fellow sangis, then I ask for you to mute them. But as long as that opinion is expressed towards me, I'll happily allow that. And thank you, France, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. And Design Chick, you ask, is that the significance of the goddess Saraswati on a swan? Ignorance rolling off like beads. I love that. I haven't thought about that interpretation. You might be very right. So thank you for directing me to such a symbolism. And thank you, Charlotte, for your rose. Jai Sita Ram. Amanda, you shared that you let your temper get the best of you today, and you walked off the job. You may not have a job to go back to. If you can recognize your mistake and learn from it, then that's all you need to do. Sometimes what is even louder than the words we use is how we come to amicable terms after. Amicable. How we resolve the situation. That can be a sign of a great leader. A true leader is not necessarily one that is flawless, that doesn't make mistakes, but one that acknowledges them, takes accountability for them. Nonetheless, there is also the side of it that if you stood up for yourself, if this was the cause of your anger, anger can be a genuine method of self-expression. As long as we don't hurt anyone with it. Thank you, Nonea Welsumya, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, PG, for your rose. Jai Sita Ram. And thank you, Ammon, right? Happy to have you here. And thank you, VK Francis, for your ice cream cone. Jai Sita Ram. And that's right, Johnny. I used to make math raps on this platform. I did a math rap about a few different aspects of, well, mathematics, science, namely about the monster, which is an object that exists mathematically in high dimensional space. Very beautiful in theory, lots of symmetries to it. And symmetries tend to be beautiful for our human brains. And naturally I have, through mathematics, found something that expanded my mind and heart even more. And it's like when a child is holding a granola bar. You know, the granola bar might have pieces of chocolate in it, chocolate chips. It's pretty tasty, yeah, sure, the child will eat it. But if you walk past eating a chocolate bar, Mommy, I don't want the chocolate bar anymore. Or sorry, I don't want the granola bar anymore. I want the chocolate bar. When you have a hint of something sweeter, your mind becomes drawn towards that. Likewise, the heights of mathematics are so sublime, but there are things in spirituality which cannot even come close to being compared to. So a hint of that sweetness that exists not in the intellectual prowess of mathematics, but in the spiritual depths of the soul, that is much more fulfilling. And thank you, Tattvamasi, for your quintet of roses. Radhe, Radhe. And Kona girl, thank you for your 32 roses. Hari Om Tat Sat. And I will get back to making videos, Aquarius lady. Don't you worry. And thank you, Marcy, for your heart me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And thank you, Jarrett, for your tiny. Yippee! Alyssa, you share that your dog is so afraid of people. You don't know why. Aww. Well, you don't have to know the reason to come to a solution, but it can help. Of course, with animals, it's that much more difficult to gain trust because we don't have the ability to communicate through words. So the saying that actions speak louder than words is especially true in the case of our beloved furry friends. Psychologists are coming to understand today that many of the techniques that work for humans also seem to apply to other animals. Psychologically, we are very similar. Dogs can be diagnosed with anxiety, with depression, and they can even be medicated for it. I learned that the medication that I'm on actually can also be given to animals too for anxiety and depression. And I love that our brains are similar in that regard. Likewise, our brains have the ability for neuroplasticity. It has the ability to grow, to strengthen its connections. And so, much like how we can discover that there's more to life than being afraid. Animals can too, just in different ways. Takes a lot of trust. That's for sure. I don't know if you can hear my tummy. It's been making a lot of noises. Gregor, you ask, do any animals have a neocortex? You genuinely don't know, but you feel it's no. I'm not sure if you're referring to the same thing, but I think the neocortex is actually one of the most universal parts of the brain. If I'm not mistaken, it's the core part of the brain stem, or very close to it, sometimes referred to as the monkey brain or the lizard brain, because it's the primal labeler. You hear a sound, I label it as that. You see someone, I label you as that. Gets us into trouble. Gregor says, no, the neocortex is the winkle eye on top. The wrinkles on top. What am I thinking of that? The other way around. Do forgive me. I think my neurology certainly needs some work. So it seems. And yes, that is right, small. Actually, I've written a part on the frequently asked questions page in the link tree in my bio on that question, if I am on medication, which I am. And to add to that, Danny boy, you ask, or rather share, that you find it confusing that you are accepting of medical science but look to spirituality for life lessons. That's an excellent question. And in my opinion, the question comes from seeing science and spirituality as mutually exclusive. But there is very much an overlap, and learning to embrace both allows us to have, a greater picture of the whole. Science is the study of the external, and spirituality is the study of the internal, whereas science is all about the observation of objects. Spirituality is about the observer itself. There is so much truth to spirituality that some people might feel like it's an alternative to science. But that isn't necessarily true. Spirituality can help empower you to make the right decisions scientifically, according to the limits of your physiology. For example, in my case, I really struggled with adequate communication with my doctor. I didn't have that connection that I needed to really get the most benefit out of the family practice. And so the more I became spiritual myself, the more I was able to better express what my needs were to my doctor were, and show up on time for the appointments and get the help that I needed physically. So I see medical science and spirituality as beautiful facets of life that are not in contradiction to each other. I hope that answers your question. And that's a great addition, Dr. Risha, that research studies in the field of medicine support mindfulness and meditation in enhancing mental health. Yeah. User 574, you had asked, which background assumption do you have on consciousness? Is it panpsychism? There are no assumptions we can make about consciousness. At the same time, we can do nothing but assume about it, since it cannot be known. We can talk about it as if it is an object of our experience, but it's the very subject of our experience. It is the one which is the knower, and so it can't be known by its own knowledge. Consciousness is the background layer. It is the very light source upon which the movie of our mind is illuminated. There are no words or set of words that can describe its nature. There is no philosophical framework, no idea that can make it known. It is the very essence of life, the I am. Thank you, baby Billy, for your pair of roses. Did I thank you for those already? And thank you, Bobby Sue, for your applause. Radhe, Radhe. Hello, Liz. You ask, can we logically prove logic to be true? We have proven that it's impossible for logic to prove its own consistency. That's Gödel's second incompleteness theorem, I believe. The first incompleteness theorem states that a logical system that's capable of expressing basic mathematics or mathematical statements that involve arithmetic. Such a logical system can never be both simultaneously complete, meaning having answers to everything, and consistent, meaning having only one answer for everything. So there has to be some trade-off. Either your system is incomplete or inconsistent. And mathematicians prefer incomplete. We're happy to have questions to which there are no answers. But an inconsistent theory is not very fruitful. Mathematically speaking, that is. And say again, the second incompleteness theorem states that no model can prove its own consistency. And thank you, Divine Union of the Soul, for your 11 roses I tally up, and for your pair of TikToks. Radhe, Radhe. You're very welcome, Dr. Risha, if I am pronouncing that right. Or Richa. Happy to have you here. Mo, you had asked, do I think that the universe has computer code in it? Well, computer code exists in computers, and computers exist in the universe. So by inheritance, there does exist computer code in the universe. But you're asking about if the universe itself runs on computer code, if all of this is a program of sorts. Now that, a very good question. One thing's for certain, for sure that if this universe is being run on a computer, then that computer is much bigger than our universe. It would have to be. Even a single hydrogen atom, now that requires such an immense calculation according to the Schrödinger wave function. We have solved for an explicit solution of a hydrogen atom, but not for any other atom. A hydrogen is the most simple atom, and yet every other atom, even the next biggest, helium, we haven't solved for an explicit solution for. That requires immense approximations according to calculations. So for not just one atom, but 10 to the 80 about, that's something like 10 billion particles in the universe. Could you imagine the computer that it would take to do all that calculation of all of the interactions that are happening across time and space? Whew. Incomprehensible that would be. I believe there is truth in understanding that there is a lot more than what we can observe. This idea that we're living in a simulation is not new, actually. Yeah, I like when you say shallow Hal. Could you imagine using that computer to mine Bitcoin? You'd be a very wealthy person. Some people call this universe a matrix. The word matrix actually just means feminine. Like the word matriarch, maternal, even the word material. More than 5,000 years ago, in Sanskrit, the word for simulation was Maya. It's from Maya that we get words like mata, and then in English that became mother. And it's no coincidence. We call God according to he, him pronouns. Why? What if God is a woman? We only do so relative to creation, which is feminine. We still call her Mother Nature. We call the place in which we exist our motherland, whereas the source is the divine masculine. What has come from the source, that is the divine feminine. So calling it a matrix is actually very fitting, because this universe is the feminine. With this knowledge, I hope you also see that there is no reason to escape it, because to escape it, or the desire to escape it, is ignorant of the fact that she is divine too. You are in the presence of divinity, whether you are in the universe or without. So as long as you are here, you might as well embrace the divine feminine. To escape the matrix, to escape Maya, is like trying to run away from the divine feminine. She is everywhere. It's an impossible task. And thank you, April Rain, for your rose. Radhe, Radhe. In Taiwan, you asked, how do you escape the universe? Well, physically speaking, you'd have to travel faster than light, I'm sure. Spiritually, however, the Buddhists call that possibility nirvana, from where the band gets its name, nirvana. Vana means something like an expression, and the prefix nir means not. It's a negation of. So nirvana means that which is beyond expression, the expressionless. The expression in this case refers to the universe, the expression of life. So to go beyond it means to somehow escape this cycle of incarnation. The Buddhists, they say, you can try to take your life away to escape the suffering, but you'll just end up as another crying baby. And so we're stuck in this maya, this samsara, is the complementary term. The pathway to enlightenment, that is the path to escaping it. However, it is said that even the Buddha never actually reached enlightenment, or never actually entered nirvana. That at the moment of enlightenment, the Buddha said, no, I will not leave until every being has been liberated from samsara before me. Take of that what you will. May you have beautiful dreams, Mo, and a restful sleep. Radhe, Radhe. Auntie, you shared that you're just starting your journey in Buddhism. That's very exciting. I'm happy for you. And Liz, you are wondering if I can tell me your perspective on twin flames. I think I swapped which pronouns I was using halfway through that sentence. You're wondering my perspective on twin flames. Fire. What does fire do? Fire erupts as light, as heat, expanding upwards and outwards. What we place in fire ends up shrinking, reducing, contracting to a point. So there are two aspects of fire, one that expands and one that contracts. We call these twin flames Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is the contraction. Shakti is the expansion. What we call as feminine simply refers to Shakti. Haven't you ever noticed people who are very feminine? You can never seem to pin them down. They're always just expanding. Their heart is growing. They're going from one place to another. Their heart is erupting in various kinds of expression, song and dance. They are very colorful people, very loud, very bright. This is the Shakti, the feminine. But there is another dimension to life known as Shiva. He, on the other hand, represents the complement of that. Haven't you noticed that very masculine people, they are one-pointed in what they do? They are often very still. They are in their own head, as it were. They wear very dark colors. They are not interested in self-expression as much as they are interested in inward resolution. These people are disciplined. They do not adventure much. Such masculinity may be rare today, but we still see it in some ways. These are the twin flames of life existing within everyone. A dimension of expansion and of contraction. To marry your twin flame, to marry the twin flames, simply means that your expansion and your contraction is balanced within you. That you are just as much expressive outwardly as you are resolved inwardly. And thank you, Vivian, for your paper crane a few minutes ago. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, John Simon, for your pair of roses. Hari Om Tat Sat. Someone with an emoji that doesn't render on my screen. You ask. Your name is User Not Found. Do you believe death is a gateway to a different dimension? Sometimes where we go is not so different from where we come from originally. If life is the creation of experience, and death is the destruction of said experience, then death is not anything new, as it is a returning to what you once were. An annihilationist might call that nothingness, might call that void. But it is from that very void that your life originated in the first place. With this in mind, I see death not as a gateway to a new dimension, but a gateway to experiencing another aspect of a life that is not so different from the one you are living now. And thank you, Vivian, for your subscription. I am happy to be in your service. Radhe, Radhe. Alright, I am going to end the live now, momentarily. I did promise my father that I'd go and play a game of chess with him, and I was supposed to end my live 20 minutes ago. So I'll have to hurry up. But before we close, I would like to ask you all my question of the day today, which is, What have you learned from fear? And thank you, Snot, for your pair of roses. Radhe, Radhe. Thank you, Auntie, for your tiny. Yippee! And MJ, thank you for your hand hearts. Hari Om Tat Sat. And thank you, Auntie, for your rosa. In addition, then how you share. I could die from it or be reborn from it. I love that. Lily, you share that what you've learned from fear is there's always a lesson waiting for you in it. Beautifully put. And very meta. You've learned that there's something to learn from it. Not to go into dark places, says Wanderer. Who knows what's lurking in the dark? Gregar, you share that you've learned that you have the ability to survive, even when you didn't think so at the time. Tiana learned the depth of her own strength. Beautifully put. David, you share that you learned that fear can be overcome. And Aquarius Lady, you share that fear can destroy. It does have a destructive aspect to it. That's for sure. Auntie, you share that. Yes, fear, strength, and it's an illusion. We can become stronger through fear, absolutely, and oftentimes what we're scared of isn't really real. That's for sure. Alright, I'm going to minimize the question of the day for now. I thank you all for looking into this inquiry with me. And thank you, Tatvamasi, for your pair of TikToks, GG's, and ice cream cones. Radhe, Radhe. Before we go, let us read just perhaps another question from Sri Ramana Maharshi's spiritual teachings. I'll put the cover up. Here we are discussing the nature of self-inquiry, asking the question, who am I? The questioner asked, how long should inquiry be practiced? Ramana Maharshi responds, as long as there are impressions of objects in the mind, so long the inquiry, who am I, is required. As thoughts arise, they should be destroyed then and there in the very place of their origin, through inquiry. If one resorted to contemplation of the self unintermittently until the self was gained, that alone would do. As long as there are enemies within the fortress, they will continue to sally forth. If they are destroyed as they emerge, the fortress will fall into our hands. All right. Tomorrow, we will begin with the question, what is the nature of the self? I thank you all for listening to that short question with me and answer. And thank you to those who sent a gift whilst I read. Thank you, MJ, for your donut. Radhe, Radhe. And Valley Wings, thank you for your swan. Ahansa. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you, LJ, for your little crown and love you. Hari Om Tat Sat. New again, thank you for your rose. And thank you, Aunt Vicky, for your donut. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, John Simon, for your heart me. And LJ for the enchanted guitar. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Now, as always, I upload the recording of these live streams to my Yamsox Lives YouTube channel. And just the other day I uploaded a video to my other channel, my ASMR Yamsox channel, which talks you down from a panic attack. In case that's something that you struggle with, you're welcome to save that to your watch later. It's linked in the link tree in my bio. And if you want to support me and get something physical in return, I do have 2 things in my store in my link tree. The first is a little toque with a tiny on it that says yippee. And the second is Yamsox. These are socks with yams on them. And currently I'm saving up for a trip to India. And I'm about halfway there, a little more than halfway, thanks to all of you. And it's very humbling to receive such a wave of support for this endeavor. And I very much look forward to it. And thank you, MJ, for your dozen roses. Radhe, Radhe. And thank you, LJ, for another finger heart. I certainly will bring you all on the journey when it comes. Now, I thank you all for being here and for allowing me to go and play a game of chess with my father, if he is still open to it, given that I may be half an hour late or so. But tomorrow we will live stream again. Thank you, LJ, for another finger heart, and G for your trio of roses. Radhe Krishna, Radhe Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radhe Radhe, Radhe Shyama, Radhe Shyama, Shyama Shyama, Radhe Radhe. May you all have a beautiful rest of your present moment.